Hello and welcome to the Alpha Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software. I'm joined today and actually presenting today is Sarah Mitchell, our Director of Customer Success. Sarah will be giving a presentation at the beginning of today's webcast, but we're also here to answer questions, and you can type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. Also keep in mind you can send us questions at any time by sending in your emails to guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Dave.
Let me go ahead and make you the presenter, but I think you already are.
I think I already am, yes.
Easy peasy for me today. All right.
Yeah,
Ooh,
easy
very
mode.
nice. It reminds me of spring for us in this hemisphere.
Yep. In the Northern Hemisphere, spring is underway.
Yeah.
I do believe that means fall is underway in the South?
That
Southern
would be the
Hemisphere?
case. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, welcome everyone. As a reminder, here's our upcoming webinar schedule. Today we're going to do a overview of the features in the latest release. However, I just wanted to put this out there. And next week, we're going to do mobile image capture on the 20th, 27th of April and May 4th. We are going to be doing a deep dive on some of the new features that we're going to mention today. So if you're interested in using IndexedDB, storage connections to Dropbox or Google Drive, as well as the new security framework templates that have been added for managing users and groups, definitely tune in on those future webinars. And as we go through today's presentation, if anything comes up, you want to ask questions about it, go for it. This is largely going to be an overview because there's a lot of stuff and I cannot demo all of it. It's just too much. But also, if you didn't get the memo or you've never registered this webinar before and you're seeing this on YouTube, we did change the webinar link, so you will need to re-register if you were watching our past webinars and did not get a notification. You can go to this link on our website, www.alphasoftware.com/weekly-alpha-anywhere-overview-webinar. And just fill out that form and it will add you to this webinar that we've got running now, and you should get those notifications when the next one is available or coming up. And also, DevCon 2022 is coming up on October 18th to 22nd. We hope you can join us. You can register for that on our website as well at www.alphasoftware.com/devcon2022. It should be a really fun event, and I hope to see you there. So some of you may be aware and others may not, but we put out a new release of Alpha Anywhere the end of last month, last week of last month, last March, which was last month. And I wanted to go over some of the new features that are in that release. This is not a completely comprehensive review of all the new things. I left out a few small things that I didn't feel were worth mentioning because it was just like some minor cleanup of like the UI and stuff like that. That doesn't really affect your development. But I have tried to break everything down into categories that I think are relevant today. So we're going to go through these new features broken into category, and we're going to start with your development environment. So the environment where you build your applications. And we've made some improvements in this area that I think some of you will find useful. And specifically, there's a couple categories of this. There's live preview and live test. Some changes have been made. One that may be of interest to some folks is that we now will use your computer's machine name when we generate the live test link, as well as the live preview link internally used within Alpha Anywhere. And you can control that in the web project properties on the design time tab. There's an option in there for specifying what name to use when making those links. Previously, it would use localhost, but now it's going to use your machine name. You can go in there and change it to other values if you want to use your local IP address. If you want to use something like 127.0.0.1, which I believe is yourself, yourself being the actual machine that's running, that option is in there. You may need that information if you're trying to do stuff like test your app on another device on the same network. For convenience, that URL, knowing how that is generated, may be easier for you to deal with as your machine name or your local network IP address, as opposed to localhost, which would be self-referential. So that's a change. We've also updated how live test works on Alpha Cloud. When you deploy to Alpha Cloud using really anything, including live test, it creates a deployment, and those, if you're using like the $99 plan, you are limited to 5 deployments. And previously, live test was just running; it wouldn't like terminate itself, so that was counting against some folks. And now they will automatically expire after 2 hours. So that should help with that. If you've got a small plan, it also uses less resources, so that's nice. And then for those of you who have IIS, there is an option now to set up your local IIS server to use HTTPS. There is a link in the live test dialog to explain how to do that. It's essentially a guide on how to create a self-signed certificate and then use that on IIS locally to do your development testing. If you're using Community Edition, I do not believe you can live test to IIS, so this may be limited to people with the full development environment. But these other 2 items are definitely Community Edition features. We've also expanded Backup Restore. We've added a new Backup Restore feature in the Web Project Control panel, and if you can click that, you can back up your project to local storage. So you could store it up in S3, or using the disk option, you could store it on a specific place on your hard drive or another server that may be on your network. And then in addition to that, we've also added the option when you restore a component. So if you right-click a component file in the workspace, there's a backup option in there that shows you backups of the component over time. Alpha Anywhere will capture copies of your component as you develop it and store it. There's a new option to restore a component as a new file. So that would allow you to make a new file to look at things side by side if you wanted to. We do have some changes on the Tabbed UI front, Tabbed UI being a component. There is a new smart search control you can enable. So if you have a Tabbed UI that has a lot of buttons, a button being something you can put in the, there's like a menu that on the right-hand side, or you can place it on the left-hand side of the screen. And to that, you can add buttons or controls. And when you click on that, it does something like open a component or a report or a page. Well, there's a new option to add a smart search control at the top that lets you basically search and filter all those options. So if you have a Tabbed UI that has a ton of stuff in it, and your users are finding it hard to find things, you could add this to make it easy for them to find what they're looking for. There was also an addition of 2 new client-side events, on tab pane open and on tab pane close. If you have a need for hooking those actions to do something, trigger an event or check something to make sure people aren't closing the tab when they shouldn't be able to, definitely check out those new options. The UX component, there are quite a few new thue a lot of changes to some controls, some action JavaScript, some of the new PF viewer stuff. So let's go through these all real quick. On the list control side of things, there's a behavior change, and then there's some new stuff for in-place editing. So the behavior change is, if you are familiar with the list, or even if you're not, there's an option in the list control to delay populating it with data from like a SQL database until someone has done a search. And the reasoning behind that is to improve loading of your component and putting off the population of that control until someone actually wants to see something in it. In the past, if somebody were to submit a search on a list that's been set up to delay rendering until someone is searching for something, if they submit a search with no search criteria, it wouldn't do anything. The list would remain blank. And so the new behavior is it will actually go out and retrieve all the records from your database and bring them down. So for those of you using this, that's something to be aware of. If you do a clear search, it will clear out all the records, so it won't pull everything down. So that still behaves as expected. But this is new. I wanted to make sure everybody knows about this. And then on the in-place editing front, we've added a few usability things for you to make things nicer for your users. One is an option to click the new row message. So, or not the new row message, click the no records and list message to create a new row. So if you create a list with in-place editing against a table and there are no records in your table, then there's nothing to see. So it may display a no records and list message, which I believe is optional. I think you can turn that off. However, with this change or this new feature, you can add the ability for someone to tap that or click it to create a new record and start editing.
And do you know if you're able to edit what that message says? Like, can it say something like,
Yeah, you can
there are
edit
no
the no
messages,
records and
click
list
here to add
message.
one kind of thing? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's editable. That's all configurable in list properties.
Fantastic.
And I'm going to make a note that we go look at that so that you guys can see that.
Cool.
Thanks for waiting. Also, with in-place editing, you can define an order for the choices in an edit combo control. This is new. If you want to have a custom sorting, you can do that now. Previously, you didn't have any control over that. It would just display in the order it came down from, whatever populated it. The PDF viewer control has had some new features added to it. You can now check a box to make it fill the full screen, similar to how you can check a box for the list control to make it fill a panel. The PDF viewer has that option now as well. And there's also an initial page resolution setting that you can use to change what resolution the page is at when it's first rendered. On control bars, we've actually added the ability to show or hide an item in the control bar using security groups. And this is something that happens on the server side. So keep that in mind. Security groups are often evaluated on the server side of things within XBasic because that's the most secure place to do it. But if you have a connection to your server, you can take advantage of this to dynamically show and hide things based on whether or not someone has permissions to see it based on their user roles or groups. ViewBoxes, which we've had quite a few people write in about and ask questions about, have a new option to add drag events to them. Now this is a little bit more of an advanced feature, but if you enable it, what it lets you do is hook an on drag start, on drag end, and I think while dragging, something like that, events to do something. So you could create a view box that had elements in it that you could click and drag around. Maybe you want to drag sort, like we have with the list Kanban example. There's an option there to grab a handle and change the order by moving things around. You can implement that yourself with the view box. Now, it's up to you to implement what happens, but those events have been added and are available through the items in the view box that you add to elements within it. Dropdown boxes have a new dynamic filtering option, and this is, I thought we already had this when I was looking at it, but we didn't. So what it is it lets you set up something like watching the value of a control, and then changing the filter on the options in the drop-down box when that control changes. Now, if you have a drop-down box set up to use cascading drop-down boxes, so when the value in one drop-down box changes, it affects what's in another one, that scenario, the dynamic filtering isn't going to work for you. But if it's just one box and you want to queue it off of another field, that's there, and you can find it in the settings for when you're configuring your drop-down box choices for a SQL data source. The UX component has several new things on JavaScript, and hold on a second, let me fix this. There we go. JavaScript events, some changes to how some of the action JavaScripts behave, and some new JavaScript methods. For starters, and this one's really cool, and we are going to do a webinar on it to come up with some cool ways you could utilize it. But you can add custom watch events in the UX component properties now. Whereas previously, if you wanted to add a custom watch event, you had to do something like use the $e.add method to add an event watcher using JavaScript. Watch events are events that keep track of control values. So like a drop-down box or a text box or even what's selected in a list. Excuse me. And when something changes, it triggers an action. And you can set this up now just right in the builder. It's a lot easier to deal with than implementing it through JavaScript. It's pretty slick. So check that out. It's going to be really handy in cases where a control doesn't necessarily have an event you can hook, a client-side event like a show hide or enable disable. So you can use that in other ways. We've also added new JavaScript methods to display progress bars programmatically. And I believe we've already shown that in a previous webinar. But if you guys want to dig into that a bit more, let me know. We can pull that up today. There's a new set default value method, and this is on the dialog object. And what it lets you do is dynamically change the default value for a control at runtime. And then in the file download or image upload, sorry, I'm getting these backwards. Image upload, there's an option to upload images indirectly to Amazon S3. And what that means is that when the image is uploaded from the device to Amazon S3, it goes to the application server first, which allows us to do things like generate a thumbnail for you and then put that in S3. Well, there's been an additional support to call an XBasic function when that image is being uploaded using that option. So you can do additional stuff with it. Maybe resize it or convert it to a different type, whatever you need to do. On the mobile development front, there's been a lot of changes, and we have covered most of what has happened on mobile development in recent webinars, specifically in our Android CLI build, part 1 and part 2 series, mostly part 2. But what really happened with this latest release of Alpha Anywhere is we updated the Cordova Genie to support Cordova CLI 11, which is the one you need to use if you want to target Android API level 30, which is required for new apps going into the Google Play Store. Part of that work, though, required updating the Cordova file transfer plugin so that it would work with the latest version of Cordova CLI, as well as Ionic App Flow. We also put in some effort to make sure that the Android X adapter plugin is being included where required. And what Android X adapter does is it maps the older Android libraries to their newer Android X versions. So there was a transition period from previous versions of the Android platform to the one that's out there now, and Android X came along, and there's a transition period where Android X adapter was needed to let you kind of migrate forward. So that's being included for you automatically where needed. It was needed in Ionic App Flow. It's also needed in Cordova CLI 11. For specifics on different platforms for Android, we've got PDF 417 barcode support is in there now for the barcode scanner plugin. This previously wasn't really available. It didn't work, but that's been resolved and is now available. And on the iOS side, we've done a number of things. The storyboard images will now default to an image included in the installation of Alpha Anywhere if you don't specify it. If you didn't specify a storyboard image in the past and they weren't there, builds would fail. So we're defaulting that so that doesn't happen. We've added the ability to specify your build deployment target when building in Xcode, so it knows what version you want to use. And there's a new option to generate a script that will automatically do the build for you on the Mac, sort of like how the Android CLI build works. You click the build for Android CLI button, and it launches a script and it runs. The Genie here will now generate that script, which you can then take with everything else that you need to build your iOS application on, put it up on your Mac, and then run it. And that provides a very similar experience for you, so you don't have to open up Xcode and configure a bunch of things. On the security framework side of things, we've been working hard to make it easier for people to add this into their apps. UX component has something called integrated login. When you enable it, it gives you access to all sorts of things, including now login with Google, which lets you provide your customers the ability to log in with their Google credentials as opposed to creating credentials with you on your website or application. We've added new options to control what happens when someone creates a new account, including waiting for someone who is an administrator to approve the account, sending email notifications, logging when someone tries to create an account and fails or creates a new account. Those are in there. We also added support for the default option for the redirect page. When we first added the UX login component, which serves as a replacement for our login component. So UX login is a template, login component is something else. There's an option to redirect to a new page when your client logs in. Alpha Cloud didn't support the default, which would read it out of your security settings. That's been fixed. It will now read it out of your security settings. So if you want to use default, that'll work. Managing in users and groups, we've added new UX templates that provide an interface in your web application for managing users and groups or users and roles. These are the people in your system, what groups they're in, and just gives them access to things. If that's how you've structured your application. So there's new templates for that. They're included in the security framework Genie when you run through it. They're added for you automatically. There's an administrative interface that's created now that includes those options. But they can also be added to any existing application. And we'll cover that in detail March 4th. But by all means, if you have questions about it before then, definitely email us or ask them now. Seed users. So this might be a new term for a lot of you, and we're going to do a better job of explaining this. But when you're in the development environment and you create or you enable the security framework, you're given some default users with passwords. These are seed users. They're the users and groups you work with in your development environment for testing. And then that first time you publish your application, those users get published as well. So you have something to work with on your website or in your mobile application to log in and test once you've deployed it. They're called seed users because they're the seeds. It's what you start with. But what we've done is we've added the ability to edit the extended user information for those seed users locally in the security framework. So if you go in and you look at your security settings, there's an option in there for users and groups. And there's a new link in there to select a user and then edit their extended user information right there in the IDE. And again, the security quick setup Genie has those new templates for managing users and groups, and they have been added as an administrator only section in the tabbed UI that we generate when you go through that Genie. We've also added the option to specify whether or not you want to use email addresses as the user ID or something like a username during setup, and configure the system appropriately as needed to handle that for you. This next one isn't really necessarily security related, but I've put it in this category anyway. And it's about configuring sessions, and this is for IIS and Alpha Cloud. And we've added the option for you to extend the session lifetime every time a request is made. This is a behavior change, and I don't believe a lot of people know how this works. But the session lifetime is how long someone stays logged into the system before we automatically log them out. It's also how long session information is stored for whoever is currently interacting with your application before it is reset. Every time somebody visits your site, they get a session, and that session sticks with them until the session timeout is reached. And the timeout is determined to be reached when a certain amount of time has passed. So it defaults to 15 minutes. Someone comes to your website and doesn't do anything for 15 minutes, their session times out. But there are other ways to request that it doesn't exist anymore, such as they close the browser. But with the IIS, which Alpha Cloud also uses, the lifetime wouldn't really be extended until about half of the time had passed before it reset it. And I believe this is done for efficiency reasons, but now you can say, check an option to say, always reset it on every request. Keep in mind this increases the amount of data sent with your request because that cookie information is going to be sent every single time. But this was added to resolve some requests that we had on sessions with IIS and Alpha Cloud. So with every release, we always add more XBasic functions. And here's a list of them. We've got save to file, get from file, lets you save and read data directly from storage connections. So Amazon S3, Azure. We've also added an option to add a bitmap to a PDF. And this says PDF add bitmap, but the intent of this function was the ability to add like a signature image into a PDF where you need it. We've also added a new function to doing fast download of multiple files. File downloads can happen in parallel, as it turns out. So this function lets you download a whole bunch of files from a source. It's a wrapper for an underlying function in the system, but this makes it easier to use. There are two new functions for getting and setting variables on a dot variable, pointer variable. I guess that's it. The addition of sysshell wait result. Sysshell is a function in Alpha Anywhere for running a command line function. The wait result will wait until it finishes, the program closes basically before proceeding forward. So if you've got like a bash script you need to run on the server to do something, you could use this and it will run and then wait until it's done before proceeding forward. This will only run scripts on the server. It's not going to run them on the client, so keep that in mind. We've also enhanced the email send no profile to add support for HTML encoded characters in the email subject, which lets you do things like include characters from other languages outside of English. And if this release something cool, Basic Debugger enhancement, you can now add conditional breakpoints. Breakpoints are things you can add into your Basic scripts that halt execution when that line of code is reached. A conditional breakpoint lets you do something, say, halt on this line if X is 12. So you can require that the code is in some state before breaking, which helps you do things like debug into for loops or large if statements where you don't want to break on every single value. You just want to break when you've reached like record 30. So that is a nice time saver when stepping through things, debugging your environment. So I think that's kind of exciting. There have been a lot of changes in reporting, a lot of improvements in reporting on the reporting engine side of things. Something I did want to point out that is available in this release is that we've added the option to disable clipping on controls. So if you have a text control in your report that displays some text content and it's too large, it exceeds the width or the height of the control, clipping clips that content off. So you don't see it. So you just see hard edges where it goes over those bounds. We've added the option to turn that off if needed. It's in there for, we've ran into some cases where reports were clipping and we couldn't figure out why. So this was added so that we could get your guys' reports running as needed. Also, if just know that you want columns to be a certain width, but you don't mind if they run over, you can turn that off as well. But I wanted to mention this because we have had a few people write in that they've got issues with their characters being truncated on their reports, and you can turn off clipping to see if that fixes things. So that should get you moving faster in the interim. Can't talk today. On the REST APIs front, we've actually added a new cool thing. We did that webinar a few weeks ago on how to add authentication to your REST API that you've created with Alpha Anywhere. That same interface where you set all those endpoints up now has options to add additional documentation, which is shown in the Swagger page that gets generated for your API. So you can give your service a name, you can give it a description, you can give descriptions to your arguments, descriptions to your methods, and you can specify descriptions for the response codes that may come back from your API. I'd like to take a look at that today so you guys can see it. So getting into some of the more exciting things, storage. You can now store files to Dropbox and Google Drive. Storage is a way to easily upload or download files from third-party services like Amazon S3, Azure, the application server disk if you're using the classic server, or IIS, not supported on Alpha Cloud. But the storage connection is like a generic way to sort of define where your files get saved. So we've added Dropbox and Google Drive, and we are going to be doing a presentation on this later this month. So if you're interested in that, definitely join us. We've also added cool offline support using IndexedDB as the storage system for lists and client-side data cache. This is really cool and exciting because in web applications, your offline storage options have only been local storage, which only has a capacity for 5 megabytes and will get wiped out at seemingly random times, so it's rather unreliable in some cases. IndexedDB starts at a gigabyte if it's supported on most systems and can be as much as however much space is available on your hard drive. So for web applications, storing data offline, this is huge. Also for mobile applications, this gives you a new option for storing your data that isn't the file system. So we're very excited about this. We're excited to see where this is going to take us, and we're going to do a webinar on this as well, so you guys can see how you can leverage that in your applications. And that is the end of my quick overview of the new features. Again, if you have questions, you can send them to guys@alphasoftware.com. But what I'd like to do now is kind of dig into what we've mentioned today and take a look at anything you guys want to see.
All right, helps if I come off mute. First question that we have today just has to do with backup and restore. And the question is backup or restore better than just zipping up your project and saving that? Or is it basically the same thing?
Well, I mean, it's going to depend on what you're zipping up and saving. Backup and restore is only the project, so it's not your entire workspace. That's going to be the key difference. So if you're zipping up and backing up your entire workspace, which is one level higher, backup restore doesn't. I don't think it captures that. In fact, it's right here. So this is for web project files. You can specify where you want to save it.
Oh, I see.
And where you want to restore it from.
Very good. Next question has to do instead with not so much new features, but with the PDFs. And that is when can a PDF in an alpha application, can you use pinch and zoom on the screen to adjust its size? And what would determine whether or not you could?
I don't actually know the answer to that. We would have to dig into that. My gut instinct feeling though is that if you couldn't pinch and zoom when you ran it, it probably doesn't exist yet. So we would need you to submit a feature request.
Okay, that makes sense. Again, feature requests, questions, they go to guides, guides@alphasoftware.com. I have a question here about plugins. And the question is, can you show where the plugins are for Alpha Launch? Or what the plugins are for Alpha Launch? And, and it says, and how to include them. Alpha Launch does come with a set of Cordova plugins, but you are not actually allowed to add your own to that. We can do a special version, but we don't release the source control for Alpha Launch. However, if there is a plugin that you think would be useful, especially if it was useful to other people as well, we'll certainly consider adding that into Alpha Launch. so that you'll have access to it. So the alpha launch plugins themselves, we can get you a list if they're not in documentation already. I could certainly talk to the person here who maintains that.
So they're not in documentation, but I'm just gonna drag this onto the screen for you guys. There is an option in alpha launch. It's going to be in the settings section, but there's a list of PhoneGap plugins, and that's going to list everything that's in there.
Wonderful.
And that will tell you what's available to you. As Dave mentioned, you can't add anything to it that isn't already there. But if you would like a custom alpha launch that has those, you can contact us.
So this person is interested in including the camera. I think camera is one of the ones.
Camera is already included. Yeah. In fact, I think it's camera with EXIF is already included. So you should be all set.
All right, totally related on this page. Do you notice it was at 1% when that screenshot was taken? I don't know who was doing that, but they were working fast, I guess.
Quiet. No questions. I actually don't know who took that screenshot.
No, that's fair.
It wasn't me because this gap.
PDF viewer properties in the Zoom. Someone else asks, could we have a look at the PDF viewer properties?
Absolutely. Let's go do that right now. Let's make a new web component. We're going to make a UX component. I'm in build 8099. This is just a heads up, which is the build number for the release that we had. If you're running 8098, you should update. Okay. So we're in the UX component. I'm going to come over to add control and do PDF viewer control. This is the control, and so these are the new things that have been added. There's fill panel card. If that's checked, it will fill the panel card if it's in one. And then initial resolution fit to page, meaning fit the PDF page within what is available to view. This can be other values, so 100%, 200%, 700. I believe these are percents, and then 33 and 55. So if we add that panel card around here. So that's set to fill, and I don't really have a PDF here, but we'll live preview it anyway. There we go. So this is what it looks like. If you don't have anything loaded, it just loads a blank page. But these are the controls you have to navigate it. Here's the option to fit the zoom. This is what page it's on. This lets you find text. Sorry about that. If you click this question mark, it shows you this chunk of information. It's in JSON format, but it's just some details about the PDF, and then there's a download option.
Neat. So what are the configuration options then again for the PDF viewer?
So you can specify whether or not it has an option to download the file and whether or not it has that question mark thing that showed the JSON, as well as you can configure it to fill the panel card or have specific width and height, which is defined up here, as well as an initial resolution. And then some
the initial resolution,
stuff.
Right? So if you wanted to start out zoomed, scrolled in, zoomed, whatever, you could do that. Okay.
Yeah. So you can set the PDF statically at design time here if you want to. You can also populate it using JavaScript. It has, I believe set value. Is what you can use with it.
But yeah, I don't suspect there are pinch view options here, but that would be a pretty cool thing to add.
Yeah. I mean, I can.
I mean, you could still magnify it just using the magnifier, but if you're running this on a tablet or something, it's kind of a more comfortable.
Oh no!
You can do it with the scroll bar?
No, like I'm pinch zooming my screen, but what it's actually doing is zooming the whole page.
It's the whole page, right? Yeah, not just the document.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well. Cool. Let's see. How well does PDF search work on multiple pages? Is the question.
I don't know. This is actually it's implemented using a PDF viewer control built by Mozilla. So I would assume the search is pretty good.
It's okay, yeah.
Yeah. But I don't actually know.
Nice. And someone said, can you change the zoom level to other than the default percentages? So I think 33% was one of them or whatever, but that seems to be the, like, if you wanted it to be
12.
12%. Okay. Of course, how will we know if it worked? But we'll see.
We'll see. 12% works. It's not
Yeah.
shown in this
It's
drop
just
down,
not
but
one of the
you
options.
can
So I
do it.
suspect if you open that up, you just won't be able to go back to 12.
You just
right?
won't be able to go back to it. Yeah.
Although, can you type into that box?
No, it only
Okay.
lets you pick from the list of options. Oops.
Yes, it wasn't built for
Oh,
that.
there's no undo for that action.
Oh. You're stuck. Great.
All right.
Someone said the search on PDF doesn't work for Hebrew. Well, let's take a look at it. Maybe there's an option for that.
Okay.
Nice. Let's see what else we've got here for questions. Can you type values into the PDF Zoom? That was the next one. Nope. Turns out you can't. See, we're ahead of you on this one. And well, that kind of looks like it for questions. We'll give you guys like another 10, 20 seconds to get your question in.
Yeah, well, while we're waiting for that, we can go look at the list login. So I'll make a new component here,
Cool.
a new UX. And add a list. We'll go through the Genie. We'll grab our favorite Northwind database and customers and all the fields. Select all the fields. And we're going to click OK here and then set up the in-place editing separately. Please wait while this loads. I have a slow machine apparently.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. So no records in list is found in list properties, and it's this has no records in list message. So it's off by default. If you turn that on, you can change the message shown here. And then also if you have the detail view enabled, you can also integrate in-place editing, which I can never see. So we have in-place editing, and I believe the setting on the new records is in here somewhere.
New records icon. Oh, that's Bubble Help.
It might just happen automatically. Let me check real quick. See here. You know what? I can't find it.
Okay.
So I'll double check for that, where that is. I know I had it before. Oh, right in front of me. It's right here. It's
Okay.
add record when message is clicked. It's going to be on by default. You can turn it off if you don't want that behavior.
Got it.
So that's where you set it. This is only going to be shown if in-place editing is enabled and you've turned on has a no records and list message. And if you want to customize this, you certainly can. This is just HTML.
And that's where you could say no records and list. Click here to add a record, kind of thing.
Yeah. You like no records and list. Click here to add a record. You know, that's what you can do. I think we had a help article on how to insert a script in here that would add that behavior for you. But now you can just check a box.
Oh, great. Nice.
To do that.
Very cool. We have another question. again on the PDF thing, and that is, can you copy text from the PDF, or is it not that kind of control? I guess you'd have to load it up.
That's a good question. I'd need to load a PDF. Let me find one. I have a bunch. I need to.
All right. Yeah, that's good.
I just want to find it off screen here for you.
Sure.
There we go. All right, so let's configure this guy. Let me cancel. Web projects, open this directory. And then copy this guy in here.
There we go.
So this is in the same folder as the component, so I can reference it.
Oh, and it's a nice big PDF file, so I can really
nice big PDF. So I can reference it by just putting the name here,
cool.
because it's in the same directory. So assuming my assumptions are correct with live preview. There we go.
Nice.
Can you select the text? Doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can.
Yeah. More questions.
Let's go look at the web services for REST. You've created a new definition to create a REST service. And let's expose the Northwind database, because it's our favorite database. Everyone loves this database. And we're going to set the properties on this guy.
Created the Northwind store for real, you know? That would be funny.
Customers. Okay. The Northwind store. It might exist already. So this is the service builder. You can use it to expose or restrict services, endpoints, things people call when your service is published. But the new stuff that got added was service, these links here. So define service name and description, and then how to edit the method description option and how to edit the argument definition. So if you click on this, it's going to ask you, your name, your description, what version, if you'd like to change that. And then this explains how you go in and change things. So for the methods, they actually get defined in the XBasic class that backs this, and you can use it using this syntax here. And so if we copy that to the clipboard and we edit the class that was generated for us, if we come down here and find, so which one is exposed? Customers select. So we come down here and find customers select. You see here, those are those arguments. If those didn't exist, that text I just copied, I could paste it in here. Oh, it actually gave me a whole function. So there you go. There's a function you can add. But this is the syntax you need to use to edit the method description here, as well as the arguments. So it's argument, the name of the argument, parentheses, and then a description of what you need to put in that argument, or what you want people to enter.
Nice.
I do want to exit without saving. Let's see here. There's also, let me quickly look it up. There's one more thing to edit the response codes. So if you go into one of these guys and you edit the method properties, there's an option down here to define the response codes. And then here you can insert JSON markup that defines the the types of response codes that it might return. So if you have authentication required, you might want to say, if it's 200, if it's successful, and it'll give you a 401 for any other reason. And so you could set that up here. Sort of a handy thing. And all of that goes into this Swagger definition thing. So click OK there. Oops, I want this one. Create the API test page. Customers test. Always allowed. I think I need to save this. Go back here. Yeah, let's do it. That's not what I wanted. Let's do a live test of customers test. There we go. So this is the super exciting page has been created.
Mm-hmm.
Customers test. There's our customers. There's our customers select. Don't know if it saved the responses here just yet, but that's where all that information will show up. It's on this page.
Cool. Another question. This one has to do with control bars, and someone wants to put a template holder in a control bar.
A template holder?
Yeah, I'm thinking that what they mean is like templating as in I want to insert maybe the logged in user's name or something like that, maybe something that's in a system variable or
Okay.
to a template.
It was the question, how do I do that?
Yeah, how do you get template holders to a control bar?
How do you put a placeholder in a control bar? Okay,
I think that's
let's add a panel card around our list. We'll insert a header, and we'll add a control bar.
Cool.
We'll look at the control bar. So control bar, you can add items to the control bar, and one of those items is HTML. You could put that in there, and then specify its text to be like a div, like a placeholder. I guess is one way you could do it, and then you can use the JavaScript to insert the value into that.
And it looks like
another option.
HTML. Oh, sorry to go back. If you go back just for a second, it looks like there are settings for HTML template. That might be what they're referring to.
HTML template is going to insert one of these templates.
Yeah.
Just like a predefined HTML layout.
Or one
it
of
sounds
your
like
own.
what they want to do is have some sort of like value display up in here. What I wanted to do is come back here and go to data, add a data item, and say header. How do I define this? Enter the value. Okay, so come back to our item. I can insert header here, and then I have to add a layout, so it'll show up.
Yep.
So we add a layout, and then we'll just add a line, and we'll add our thing in the middle. There's our header. On second thought, let's also do this. I'm going to put a panel layout around this so I can add another panel card. And then we're going to add a button. Update header. So what this button is going to do when you click it, it's going to change the value in that control bar. And I think we can do this as action JavaScript. Control bar.
Update control bar data.
Update control bar data, thank you. This is our control bar. Our variable is header. The values, header is going to equal button clicked. And this can be a JavaScript expression. I'm just going to put in a string.
Mhm.
Fire on change. We'll keep all those defaults. Okay, and save. And then just test it. So what we should see on the left-hand side is a list with a header that has the word header in it. And then on the right-hand side, a button. So there's header. So if I update header, it updates it. So that's another option for you, is just to use data and set the control bars data.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So that's how you put it in. And you create like an HTML, you insert an item into that HTML, and then you update that item. And in this case, you used action JavaScript, so you didn't have to code it.
Yeah, but if you want to code it yourself, you can just as easily go in here and convert this to text mode, and that will show you the CV.
That'll show you the JSON script, the JSON.
So the control bar, the control bar has a JavaScript control you can get from it, and this just checks to make sure it exists before you use it. But it has a method update, all lowercase, that lets you set the variables and the data values, et cetera.
Neat. And it looks like animation is a possibility too, if you wanted to.
Yes, you can animate it.
Yeah.
You can say don't animate it.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what else we got. All right, well, it looks like we answered that question, which is terrific.
Fantastic.
It's funny. All right, so I'm going to go take a look. I have one last question, and it has to do with PDF clipping, which frankly is something I'm not familiar with. But it says, is it possible to globally turn off for the whole report PDF clipping rather than on a control by control basis?
Nope.
It's not. Okay.
No,
so
I've been asked this question several times. You can't do it.
Well, if we ask it the right way, can we get a different answer? I guess is the question. No, I guess not.
I mean, if you ask me to lie to you.
Can you briefly tell the rest of us what PDF clipping is so we know it's not?
Yeah, let me pull up an example for you. This is in documentation. So, and you're going to find it in troubleshooting, because this was born out of a troubleshooting issue. So PDF clipping is this. See how this text is chopped off because it goes beyond this box. The box is the size of the control. The clipping is what you see there. If you turn it off, which is going to be an option in the properties for the selected control, it's the disabled clipping option over here.
Yeah.
0. If you turn it off, everything will overflow its bounds. So it will now overflow. So like here, like confections was actually trimmed a little bit on the S. So this will help with that. If you've got controls that seem to be clipping and resizing them isn't working for you, try turning off clipping.
Okay. But on a control by control basis, although
you have to do it on a control by control basis,
multiple controls of the same type and set the property all at once. Are we that
smart? I don't know if you can select multiple controls in the report editor or not. I've never tried that.
Okay.
Well, I know you can select multiple and move them. I don't know if you can select multiple and edit them.
I see what you mean. Yep. Gotcha. All right, and very cool. Excellent. Well, that looks like, I know. Yes, sorry for the answer that you didn't want, but send that in as a free feature request, and we'll.
I would love to say yes, but I can't.
Well, good, but you're gonna be wasting your time. Yeah, wonderful. Hey, Sarah, thanks so much for presenting today. We are out of time. Thank you, everyone, for showing up today and for asking questions. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, but in the meantime, you can always send an email to guides@alphasoftware.com. Thanks again for attending. Take care. We'll see you next week. Take care. Stay well. Bye-bye.